Well, good morning, everyone. Before we jump into this last message in our 63 series, we have an opportunity for men in the life of the church in April to gather for a retreat. So I'm going to have Aaron Coleman come up. Would you put your hands together for Aaron real quick? My favorite thing about church is random clapping for strangers. They're like, I don't know why we're clapping for this guy, but here is Aaron, everybody. Aaron's been part of the retreat. He's kind of helped with some aspects of it, and I asked him if he'd just spend a few minutes this morning kind of giving a snapshot. So there's a lot of guys out here who don't know anything about it. Could you tell us what to expect? What's it like? You've been a handful of times, so.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. We built and designed a men's retreat last weekend in April for the men in the church just to come and refresh, recharge, but most importantly, just get to know each other. A lot of times it's difficult to get to build deeper relationships with men inside the church, and we said, hey, let's create this event. So it's come out on a Friday night. We have catered barbecue. It's up in McCall. We're at a house that was really designed for big groups of people. It's lots of fun. There's pool table, video games. There's a huge fire pit outside, yard games. It's a really awesome kind of place to host an event like this. But you show up Friday night. We eat really well. We sit around the fire Saturday morning, typically wake up, have a big breakfast, and then the remainder of the day is really yours. We have some planned hikes. We have hot springs planned. We have some people just go out on the lake. Really, you can do whatever you want. We come back together at night. We eat a massive feast of steak. Lots of fun, more fire time. And then we wrap up Sunday morning, get you out on the road by 10. So it's a quick event, but it's really special. There's a lot of connections that are made. We eat really well, and we just have a really good time.
I was listening to you last service. I'm like, I guess men are really that easy. It's like, hey, we're doing a thing. There's going to be meat there. And it's like, oh, go, right? So, but Aaron, there's going to be some guys. It's a small retreat. We intentionally kind of cap it in a small space so you can get to know some folks more and stuff. There's going to be guys out here with all sorts of reasons why they can't go. Busy life, work, kids, commitments, springtime catching up with everything going on, stuff they're working through in their home. Like, give the pitch. Tell them why they should come.
Yeah. This church is full of really, really awesome people, and one of the best parts about this retreat is you get a chance to dive deep with people and get to know them and create hopefully some lifelong friendships. I know I have. It's been really special for me over the past 4 events that we've done. So if you're on the fence at all, give us a call. I'm happy to talk through what to do. It's not intense. There's no sermons or anything like that. We have some cool discussion.
Yeah. Thanks.
But bottom line, if you're into Friends, if you like fire and you like meat, you should come.
Friends, fire and meat. Thank you, Aaron. Hey, would you thank Aaron for coming on up? We need to map these things out better. I mean, your sales pitch was there's no sermons. And then that's exactly what we're doing right now. My apologies, everybody. Hey, go to eastern.life. That's where you can sign up for that. Aaron's also around all morning. Grab him in the lobby and say, tell me more. There are a few spots left in that weekend, so we'd love to see it fill up and for men to take advantage of that. If you're joining us for the first time or you've been around for the spring, we're in a series called 63, which is 9 weeks walking through the life and the events and the moments, the people, the miracles, the purpose of Jesus. And we're right up, this is Palm Sunday in the life of the church. So we're right up to the final moments of the life of Jesus leading to our Easter Sunday celebration next week. And we're going to conclude that journey today. And in some ways I say we're going to end it, but it's also the beginning because we're going to come to the place where we get to kind of this critical moment with Jesus where we go, what next? What next? And so previously we walked through that Jesus had arrived in Jerusalem and the streets were lined and people were celebrating that he's coming. They actually said, Hosanna. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. The celebration was at an all-time fever pitch. And the enemies of Jesus had already sent out spies and tried to find opportunities to murder him, and they had several failed attempts. John, we're going to be in the Gospels of John, Luke, and Mark, and really looking at stitching together a lot of story this morning. And so prepare yourselves. We're going to be seeing all the events that lead up into this final week. And John records this from last week. He says, see, John 12:19, see, this is getting us nowhere. These are those in opposition to Jesus. This is getting us nowhere. Look how the whole world has gone after him. And that's not like my sales pitch to say, look how great Jesus is. It's to say in this moment, the momentum was fully on the side of Jesus and his followers. So much so that those who were in opposition were declaring, what can we do? There's nothing we can do to stop his movement. And then Jesus gathers his followers for Passover. It's the Passover celebration. And while he's doing that, he hints at a few things that are going to change, a few things that are that he's been forecasting or foreshadowing. And he says they're finally here. The first is there's a new covenant. He's introducing a new way of relating to God. This is no small thing or not even just like religious jargon. Jesus is saying human people in their hearts and their lives and their minds, there's going to be a new way that they find themselves near God, that they find themselves good with God, that they encounter God and they find their purpose and their meaning. And it's all going to be new. And the systems and the regulations and the structures and the kind of the code, the ladder we try to climb with our morality and our virtue, like these things are all going away, and Jesus is supplanting them. He's fulfilling them. It's like new terms and new conditions. Now, what we're going to be in then is what's called the farewell discourse of Jesus. It's these final things he said, and we're familiar with this. It's in our YouTube and our TikTok, and we read books about it. Those speeches that people give, the college commencement address when they're in their final, their final moments with a terminal diagnosis, and they speak to these graduates about life, and it's kind of this moment that culture grabs. That's farewell discourse. That's what Jesus is doing here. And in this discourse, the disciples get pretty excited, the followers of Jesus. They're kind of like Jesus, because everyone's behind Jesus. There's nothing that those who oppose him can do. And they're like, Jesus, we want to do this with you. We want to go where you go. We want to do what you do. So that's all of our backstory. That was like previously on 63, right? John chapter 13, verse 34, we'll jump in. Jesus says, as he sits with his followers, he says, a new command I give you. Love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. And by this, everyone will know that you're my followers, that you're my disciples, if you love one another. So a new way of relating to God, a new way of being made whole with God, and a new way of living in your day-to-day life. Jesus introduces a new way of relating to others. And I know this is very basic, right? That this is what Jesus did. He introduces this new way. But love one another was not a new command. It's not like all throughout history, it was like, hate people, and then Jesus came along and was like, I say love people, and he was so amazing. Love has always been on the table. People have always wanted to operate in love and to live a life out of love, but it's not easy, is it? It's kind of been the struggle. What was new was the conditions of the love. Jesus says, as I have loved you, so you love one another. And all kind of the ambiguity about what love looks like is removed. How Jesus loves is on full display. We've been looking at parts, bits, and pieces of it. The 4 accounts of the life of Jesus, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, tell the story. Many of us would say people in our lives told that story, and that was kind of what introduced us to what we call the good news, the message of Jesus Christ, was like someone like you who loved the way Jesus loves. Maybe another way to say this would be, I'm giving you a fresh command. Have a heart for one another out of the resource of my heart for you. Like that, have a heart for one another. Here is the way everyone out there will know you have been discipled to me, the way you have a heart for one another. Heart and love are very interchangeable words, and agape is the word that Jesus speaks, this kind of unconditional, forward-leaning love. If you look at the actual text, 4 times in 3 sentences, Jesus says, have a heart for or love one another. 3 times he says one another. 4 times have a heart, love. 3 times one another. And so I think the point of the way of Jesus is pretty straightforward. The mutually lived out heart love of Christians for one another will be the single greatest missionary force in the world. Now, that's a pretty distinct group of people. You might be here this morning and say, but I'm not in that Christian category. I come around here, I've got questions, or I get dragged along, or whatever it might be. But we can't miss, though, that Jesus is speaking to those who will follow him and say, if you're going to follow me, more so than your sermons or the things you hand the people on the sidewalk or the way you try to talk to people at Thanksgiving dinner about me, the way people are going to know I'm who I am is by the way you love one another. That's a challenge for just a small church in Southeast Boise. Better yet, Christians who go to other churches that you might disagree with or they might disagree with you. Better yet, the global face of Christianity is pretty complicated stuff. It doesn't mean it's not the way of Jesus, though. This mutually lived out heart love of Jesus is the evidence for everything we talk about and everything we teach. But it's important to note a few things before we move on, that the love that we're supposed to have for one another doesn't come from me. Like, my love for you comes from me. It comes from the preceding love of Jesus Christ for me. It starts there. It begins in me. And then out of me, it flows out. It's a love I've already known and experienced. So followers of Jesus, by definition, already have within them the source that allows them to love one another. There is like an order to operations to it. I can't think of a better way to explain it to you than to show you a little girl who loves waffles. Okay, so she had a waffle for probably the first time, and it was so amazing. The waffle went into her. She went, all I want is more waffles, because I've experienced, I'll just let her explain it to you.
I just can't stop thinking about waffles.
Well, you had waffles for dinner and you had waffles for breakfast. So we're going to eat something else.
Oh, I can't stop. Why can't I just stop dreaming about waffles?
Jesus looks at his followers and says, once you have it, you're not going to be able to stop thinking about it. And this little girl is fat. She had waffles for dinner. She had waffles for breakfast. And her mom, who cares about her and loves her and probably wants her to get some kale and spinach and other things. And she's like, but Mom, I had a waffle. But did you taste the maple syrup and the butter and the whipped cream and whatever you put on? She said, I had a waffle. It's all I can think about. That's a bit of the tenor of what Jesus is saying to his followers. He's saying, once you have it, you will discover that it's something you let out. It's not something you work up. Letting out is always greater than working up. There's a reason for that. One, working up is full of a whole lot of limitations. For me, the first limitation is a guy named Carlos. Oh, if you don't know me, my name's Carlos. That's not another person, okay? I am the problem here. I let out of me what Jesus has worked up in me. A new commandment out of my love for you. Out of the working of my heart for you, there's going to be something changing in your heart for others. And so the source of love is Jesus. And the goal of love is other people. The good news is Jesus isn't saying, go love more, even though it's hard. Hey, you heard me. Go do what's right. If I'm having a hard time loving, what I need to do is return to the source. And I see it as a function of something running low in my life, and I go back to get more of it, to connect to it, to have it within me. And then that love works out. It's kind of the overarching ethic of the movement of Christ. Just put yourself in their shoes. Jesus has just recently resurrected his friend Lazarus from the dead, the buried, embalmed dead. Everyone's blown away. Bethlehem has become a tourist attraction. Jesus enters Jerusalem 2 miles away, and the crowds are chanting, Hosanna, here comes the blessed one in the name of the Lord Jesus. He's here. Our King is here. The moment, and Jesus sits everyone down, and they're all leaning in. He says, and here's the new way. We're going to love one another. And if everyone's leaning in, what a night. What a moment. But the moment doesn't stop there, and for the next few minutes, we're going to drive through everything that follows. And it's hard, and it's ugly, it's painful, and laced through all of it is this idea, but it's the hope of God for you and me. Let's go right into the story. John chapter 13, verse 34. A new command I give you. Love one another as I've loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know you're my disciples if you love one another. And then Simon Peter, and I love Simon Peter because all of his dialogues with Jesus, I feel like, are the ones we are most likely to have with Jesus if we were in the story. He says, Lord, where are you going? And Jesus replied, where I am going, you cannot follow now, but you will follow later. And this great moment of Jesus' new command and all of the victory they've encountered starts to get a little murky. Peter asked, Lord, why can't I follow you now? I will lay my life down for you. And Jesus answered, will you really lay your life down for me? Very truly, I tell you, before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times. Now, Peter, like, to me, is almost an argument for why you believe that Jesus is who he said he was. Here's what I mean. Peter's story arc is really interesting. Peter didn't believe in Jesus. He was just a fisherman. And then he did believe in Jesus. And then he denied that he believed in Jesus. And then he re-believed in Jesus. And then he died for believing in Jesus. That's a very interesting movement that Peter walks through. And this is still in his I believe in Jesus moment, right? And Jesus looks at him and says, you're not always going to believe in me. You're going to have a moment where you turn away. And what's interesting is he says, you'll follow me at some point. And we know that Peter was executed for his faith, most likely crucified. Kind of Christian lore and history come together and say that Peter was crucified upside down on an X as a symbol of his Christian faith. And that may be true, but what we know is Rome put Peter to death. He did follow Jesus. It's not in the way he thought he was going to follow Jesus. Jesus then gets up from the table, and leaving there, the things become hard. And he ends up in a Garden of Gethsemane. It's this urban garden in the middle of the city. Still olive trees today that you can find marked from that place. And these ancient trees are there, and Jesus prays. And he talks to his Father. It's this very open-hearted, transparent prayer. Father, if there's any other way, if there's any other path, if there's any other cup I can drink from. And he says, but not my way, but your way. Not my will, but yours be done. And we see this humble, submission in prayer. Jesus is under such anguish that his body is suffering. And he's got close friends there with him. And he goes to Peter and James and John, and they're asleep. And he says, guys, I'm in the hardest time of my life, and you're falling asleep. And I kind of love that, because some of you will fall asleep in the next few minutes here in the sermon. And that's okay. Maybe you really need it. Peter was sleeping when Jesus was praying in the Garden of Gethsemane. He says, just stay up with me for a moment. Really, you can sleep. You're okay. You needed it. You're fine. And then in the middle of this urban garden, while they're praying, Judas, who a little bit earlier, Jesus had said, the one who's going to betray me is going to happen in just a moment. And Judas gets up and he leaves the table. And he walks away. We don't know where he goes. Well, he's back. And Judas comes back. He's got a small contingent of soldiers with him, and everything goes wrong. He goes up, he kisses Jesus on the cheek, because he signaled, the one I kissed, that's Jesus. Because they didn't know what he looked like. It wasn't that known, even though he was this kind of upstart miracle worker. And then the soldiers step in, and they ask Jesus, they say, are you Jesus? And he says, I am. And then the account tells us they all step back, because they're good, faithful, godly soldiers, and they're afraid that Jesus has just claimed he's God by saying, I am. It's a throw all the way back to Moses' conversation at the burning bush with the divine, where he says, who are you? And the burning bush says, I am he. I am. And when Jesus takes those words and puts them together, the people panic. They think there's going to be like a triple lightning strike. Nothing happens. Peter pulls his sword, and he attacks the closest guard. And that guard's name is Malchus. And Peter, he misses. He's not a soldier, but he slices off Malchus's ear. And Jesus steps in. He says, stop, Peter. And he reaches down and he heals Malchus's ear. And then the text tells us, Mark picks it up, Mark 14:50, and says, then everyone deserted him and fled. It's a pretty human note in the story. I mean, I look across a room like us and I go, I think every one of you can go back to a time when you felt somewhere abandoned. That someone you counted on or trusted let you down, or broke a vow or commitment, or you were just alone and you needed to not be alone. And if you think about that, think about this moment for Jesus. Everyone, the same crew that he was just sharing his new commandment with, has now scattered to the wind. His closest friends are gone. Peter is gone. Well, they took Jesus to the high priest, and all the chief priests, the elders, and the teachers of the law came together. So we've had all these, over the story, these teachers of the law and these religious leaders who have questioned Jesus. Now they're all together. They've never gotten this close. Jesus is essentially like caged. He's a miracle worker, and they're curious, what's he going to do? What powers does he have? This is the Jesus who raised Lazarus from the dead. This is the Jesus who fed the crowds. This is the Jesus who touched blind eyes, and we've got him now. They've never been this close. Remember, they sent out spies to try to find him because they had plots to try to kill him. And the chief priests and the whole Sanhedrin were looking for evidence against Jesus so they could put him to death. But they did not find any. The text then tells us that many testified falsely against him, but their statements didn't agree. And then they asked Jesus these direct questions. So the many who testified against him would have been the same many who stood on the streets yelling Hosanna just a short period before. Quite a turn of events. So they asked Jesus questions, and the high priest stands before him and says, are you not going to answer? But Jesus remains silent. He doesn't give them an answer. And again, the high priest asked him, are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One? And now he answers. He says, I am, said Jesus. Now, think about this. In that moment, as Jesus has been arrested, as they're asking him questions, he holds his future in his hands. All he has to do is answer the right way or answer a certain way. But what I also realize is he holds our future in his hands. And he's like, I already was praying with the Father in the garden. We've already walked this road. This is exactly where I'm supposed to be. Not only does he say I am, he turns it up. And you'll see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven. And at that point, he's gone too far. He's claiming his own divinity, and there is only one divine. That's going to be really important because in a little bit, the same people who are tearing their clothes are going to be claiming someone else is divine. We'll get to that in a second. It says, then the high priest tore his clothes. Why do we need any more witnesses? He asked. You have heard the blasphemy. What do you think? They all condemned him as worthy of death. All. The Sanhedrin, the religious leaders, Nicodemus, the curious man who came to Jesus in the middle of the night, who was part of the ruling class of the Sanhedrin, he would be in the all. Jesus, this is the moment. Now the gates are open. And some began to spit at him. They blindfolded him. They struck him with their fists and said, prophesy, Hasai. And the guards took him and they beat him. So Jesus had just announced, this is what my way is going to look like. You're going to love one another as I've loved you. And in a short period of time, the very people he loves are striking him with their fists. The very people he's come for are spitting on him. And Peter is in the courtyard watching all of this happen. He can see all of the events. This isn't behind closed doors. And 3 times people come up to Peter and they say, wait, aren't you one of those Jesus followers? Weren't you with him? And Peter says, no, I wasn't there. And the 3rd time it's a little girl comes up to him. And she says, wait, you're one of those, I saw you with Jesus. He says, little girl, you don't know what you're talking about. And the text tells us that Jesus and Peter make eye contact in that moment. And the rooster crows 3 times. Mark picks up the account. Mark 15:1, very early in the morning, the chief priests with the elders, the teachers of the law, and the whole Sanhedrin made their plans. See, they've determined Jesus' guilt, but now they need Rome to carry out their sentence because they can't legally carry out a capital punishment. That has to be done by Rome. So the plan is to go to Pilate, the governor of the region, to do their bidding quickly before sunset. Because Passover is coming. They have to make sure that Jesus is executed quickly because they have to go to church, is kind of what that is, just to be clear. So they bound Jesus, they led him away, and they handed him over to Pilate. You can imagine how hard it would be to do this. Pilate was the representation of the Roman rule that crushed their lives. And yet they take Jesus. They're so desperate, they have to take Jesus and bring him to Pilate. And Pilate always reveled in like the groveling. In history, Pilate's kind of petty. He's kind of a weak governor. And he's got this like mark against him that he's a little soft on the Jews. But he's got this balance where he feels like they bow at my feet. I'm okay. He's been the governor for about 7 years. And it's been a problematic rule the whole time. Tiberius is the Caesar, the God man. The Caesar's always God. Tiberius is the God ruler, and Pilate's his subordinate who he's appointed over this area. So that's important because they bound Jesus and they lead him away, and I got ahead of myself there, sorry. They bound Jesus, they led him away, and they hand him over to Pilate, right? So what I want you to do real quick, do me a favor. Let's all take a breath in our nose and out our mouth. Because that's a lot. And we're just in the middle of it. And I want to ask you, this might be hard for you because of your love for Jesus. You might be unfamiliar with this account. You might say, well, I know Jesus died and I know he rose from the dead, but I don't really know the details that happened in there. Or maybe for you, you say this is kind of the Christian mythology. And, I don't see what you guys get so excited about. So take a moment. You have a minute here. What are you feeling? What are you thinking? What questions come to mind? And we'll be back in 1 minute, okay?
Phonograph, I was a kid. I sat with an ear close, just listening. Was there when the rain tapped away down your face? You were a miracle, I was just holding your space. time has a way of throwing it all in your face. The past, she is haunted, the future is laced. Heartbreak, you know, drives a big black car. I swear I was in the backseat, just minding my own.
All right, take about 10 seconds.
They won't stay, they won't stay.
All right, so kind of to prepare you for the final part of the message is this. We're going to just keep marching through like each event. A lot of scripture on the screen. I just kind of want to familiarize ourselves with it and see what unfolds, how Jesus carries himself, what the end game of the whole conversation is. And you know, our heartbeat is to be a place where, like, if you've been following Jesus your whole life, you grow here, you feel at home here, you're in community here, you're becoming more like Jesus. Or if you go, I walked away from the church, or I've never really understood the faith, or I've got questions, like, it's all welcome. And I just want to encourage you. The movement here is not that it's like bang, 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 bang. Don't you all see? Have a great Sunday. It's like, oh, let's watch it unfold. We're going to go back into John chapter 18. By now, it's early in the morning. And to avoid ceremonial uncleanliness, they didn't enter the palace. They couldn't go into Pilate's palace because they wanted to be able to eat the Passover. And there's the hypocrisy of all of this is a few hours earlier, they're striking Jesus in the face and spitting on him. And then they're like, oh, we can't go in there because we got to have our celebration later. But then I kind of quickly jump to like the judgment. And then I go, oh, but I've realized something. Yes, they're absolutely hypocrites. There's also another person who's absolutely a hypocrite. That's me. So I have to be a little careful to kind of write this off as like, what's up with them? Just allow myself to be in this space to see the complexity of it. So Pilate came out to them and he asked, hey, what charges are you bringing against this man? If he were not a criminal, they replied, we would not have handed him over to you. It's kind of vague. So Pilate, again, he is appointed by the God-man Caesar Tiberius, and he has this kind of reputation that he's a little soft on the Jewish community. And the Jews can't do anything without Rome's permission. But so it's like, don't get bogged down in the details. The Jewish leaders are saying, Pilate, we need a favor. Pilate said, take him yourself. Judge him by your own law. They say, but we have no right to execute anyone, they objected. If you know Rome's history, it's brutal. That is music to their ears. Rome at its finest is demonstrating its power over life and death. So Pilate then went back inside the palace and he summoned Jesus to him. He said, okay, are you the king of the Jews? What's in this questioning is, are you going to raise up a revolt against Rome? Because that's punishable by death. Did you say you're greater than Caesar? Because that's punishable by death. Are you the king of the Jews? Is that your own idea? Jesus asked, or did others talk to you about me? Just the audacity and the confrontation in these small dialogues between Jesus and Pilate is really challenging. Pilate has the power over life and death. And Jesus has been largely quiet up to this point. And suddenly the one who can free him says, who are you? And Jesus looks right at him and says, do you have any ideas of your own, or are you just saying what you heard? And Pilate says, am I a Jew? Your own people and chief priests handed you over to me. What is it you have done? And it's always back to the original question. In front of the man who has absolute power over his life, Jesus said, my kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jewish leaders. But now my kingdom is from another place. You know what would happen. Roman history is full of groups uprising. Many of them were Jewish in this region, taking arms up against Rome, and there's a bloody, brutal, ancient battle, and at the end, Rome always wins. And Jesus is like, my kingdom's not of this world. I don't have a group of soldiers waiting to invade Jerusalem. It's not what you think, Pilate. My kingdom is different. This is actually a really valuable lesson for followers of Jesus to grab hold of. The kingdom of Jesus is not this world and getting it to be the kingdom of Jesus. It's not of this world. And Pilate says, but you're the king, right? You're the king. Let's go to Luke. And Luke also has the same account unfolding. Luke chapter 23, verses 4 and 5. So then Pilate announced to the chief priests in the crowd, I find no basis for a charge against this man. And it says when the crowd hears that, the chief priest stirs up the people all over, and they say, he's been causing a ruckus all over Judea by his teaching. And you know what? He started in Galilee. Well, that's interesting because Galilee, where the sub-governor named Herod is. And Pilate finally sees this out. He's like, oh, Galilee, whew. I'm going to send this, Herod's crazy. I'm going to send this guy up to Herod. Herod will sort it out. Maybe Herod will kill him. Maybe he won't. If you read the Bible, there's a lot of Herods. And in that time in history, there's like 5 main Herods. So just a little backstory. The Christmas story, where there's the order to kill all the children in Bethlehem, a very sad, violent story. That's Herod the Great. That's not who this is. This is Herod Agrippa. This is the Herod who beheaded John the Baptist, who was a cousin of Jesus, and we started our series with John the Baptist. So Jesus goes to Herod Agrippa. Herod Agrippa loves entertainment, and he finally has the magic worker in front of him. So he says, Jesus, do some tricks. And Jesus does nothing. And he says, you're ridiculous. You're nothing. And he sends him back. That's how short and brief the interaction is. So back to Pilate. It says, you brought me this man as one who was inciting the people to rebellion. I've examined him in your presence, and I found no basis for your charges against him. And I set him up to Herod, neither has Herod, for he sent Jesus back to us. As you can see, he's done nothing to deserve death. Therefore, I will punish him and then release him. And the crowd in anger says, away with this man. John chapter 19 tells us what the punishment is. Then Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged. The soldiers twisted a crown of thorns and put it on his head, and they clothed him in a purple robe. I think Pilate thinks he's doing Jesus a kindness. They've asked for his crucifixion, his death, and Pilate is just punishing him. And first century readers did not need a lot of explanation in what happens in these texts. It happened in front of them all the time. People died from flogging regularly from the blood loss and the infection. Metal and bone shards would have ripped the skin off their backs, and the centurions would count the number of lashes given. So it was a very technical, surgical process. It was brutal, and it was meant to display Rome's authority. They had rules, though. The flogging was not supposed to kill the person. It was just supposed to bring them to the point of death. And that's what Pilate does with Jesus. We would have looked away if this unfolded in front of us. That's how brutal it was. And now Jesus goes through this flogging. It says they went up to him again and again, and they said, "Hail, King of the Jews," in mockery, and they slapped him in the face. And then he's bloody, and he's beaten, and the biblical text tells us that he's unrecognizable. Like he was standing in front of them, and they could recognize him, and after this beating, he's unrecognizable. But Pilate's not in control of this story. And the Jewish leaders are not in control of what's unfolding. The whole way through, it's Jesus controlling what happens next. And so once more, Pilate came out and said to the Jewish people gathering, he said, look, in hopes that the sight of Jesus would maybe elicit some pity and he could have this problem off his hands. Surely this is enough. You can't even recognize him. Look, I'm bringing him out to you to let you know that I find no basis for a charge against him. And as soon as the chief priests and their officials saw him, they shouted, not enough. Crucify, crucify. And Pilate answered, you take him and crucify him. As for me, I find no basis or charge against him. And the Jewish leaders insisted, we have a law, and according to that law, he must die because he claimed to be the Son of God. Well, Pilate heard this, and he was even more afraid. What if he is? So he goes back inside the palace where he can talk more with Jesus. And let's go to Mark and kind of close our time down. Mark picks it up. It says, the chief priests accused him of many things. So again, Pilate asked him, Jesus, aren't you going to answer? See how many things they're accusing you of? But Jesus still made no reply. And the sub-governor of Jerusalem, under the power of Tiberius and Rome, is amazed at this unrecognizable man in front of him. Usually, men would have groveled and begged for a quick death. Not for life, for a quick death. Just kill me here. Don't take me to the cross. I mean, they're sitting before the one person who can set them free. And John tells us the conversation this way. Do you refuse to speak to me? Pilate said. Don't you realize I have the power either to free you or to crucify you? To which I think Jesus could have replied, then why are you so afraid? You sure seem a little off center here, Pilate. This is what Jesus says. I think this is one of the most astounding lines in the whole account of the final moments of Jesus' life. Because you've seen and heard everything that kind of builds up to this moment. Jesus answered, you have no power over me if it were not given to you from above. Now that is purpose and mission right there. You have no power, Pilate. You're just a pawn in this plan for redemption that was set in motion in the very first days, that men and women's hearts would be brought back to God through the most unimaginable cost that had to be paid. But the universe and all of its deep magic had to be set right. And I'm here to do that. Now, Pilate has seen a lot of life. He's seen men scream and die in battle. He's seen men executed and flogged, but he's never seen anything like this. Because those weren't crazy eyes. You know what I mean? Like crazy eyes. Those weren't like, you kill me, cut off the head of Hydra, and 10 more will rise up. Like the revolution's coming. They were fully aware, and they were piercing. They were fearless. Look what happens. From then on, Pilate tried to set Jesus free. But the Jewish leaders kept shouting, if you let this man go, you're no friend of Caesar. Anyone who claims to be the king opposes Caesar. Now remember, the Jewish leaders wouldn't set foot in Pilate's palace because of Passover and they had to be ceremonially clean. And now they're starting to cross a line by saying Caesar is God. Caesar's not their king. It's very clear in history. Yet here they are declaring he is. And it's a checkmate move. Pilate's been outmaneuvered. His hands are bound. They just said he opposes Caesar. What do you think, Pilate? When Pilate heard this, he brought Jesus out, sat down on the judge's seat at a place known as the Stone Pavement. It was about noon. And he said, here's your king, Pilate said to the Jews. And they shouted, take him away, crucify him. And he said, shall I crucify your king? And they couldn't stop themselves. And they uttered these words, we have no king but Caesar. The chief priest answered. Oh, that is a wild plot twist. They have spent their entirety of their lives, their power, their position, anything they can get their hands on, saying, we have no king but Yahweh, but God. And in this desperate moment, they're trading that in for Tiberius. Sometimes when we're pressed in our lives, we do tend to go to the wrong places. Well, finally, Pilate handed him over to them to be crucified. So those soldiers took charge of Jesus. And Mark tells us that they brought Jesus to the place called Golgotha. Then they offered him wine mixed with myrrh, and he didn't take it. In the Gospels leading up to this moment, there's a lot of detail. When it happened, where it was, what unfolded. There's no detail here. It's a very short detail. It just says, and they crucified him. Detail was not necessary. Crucifixion was so well known. It was so horrific. It was so prevalent. There was once a Jewish uprising, and the uprising was put down, and every soldier in that uprising was crucified publicly on the streets. The people knew exactly what crucifixion was. Thousands were put to death. I would say, though, only one chose crucifixion, Jesus Christ. One hymn says, our Savior displayed on a criminal's cross. Darkness rejoiced as though heaven had lost. That's a good place to sit in this moment. Because when Jesus died, there were no Christians. And he was the only one, and he's dead. There's no sympathy. Everyone left. Everyone fled, remember? There's a few people at the foot of the cross, but they're just heartbroken. And I think they're confused. I have in my back pocket a list of some of the things Jesus said. The Jesus who just walked through all of this, seemed to be powerless, is now crucified and dead, unrecognizable. Not long before that time, Jesus said words like this. John chapter 6, I'm the bread of life. He who comes to me shall never hunger, and he who believes in me will never thirst. Dead and crucified on the cross. I'm the light of the world. He who follows me shall not walk in darkness, but have the light of life. I don't know. It seems like darkness has won. I'm the door. If anyone enters by me, he'll be saved, and I will go in and out, and they will go in and out, and they're going to find peace. I'm the good shepherd, and the good shepherd gives his life up for his sheep. I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, though he may die, he shall live. And whoever lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. I'm the vine and you are the branches. He who abides in me and I in him will bear much fruit. The cross canceled that all out. He's none of those things when he's dead on the cross. As far as we can tell, there's no dream to keep alive. And there's no movement to keep moving. There's just sadness and despair, and we believed everything he said. What's he doing dead? You know, I think when I look deeply at those words, there's a lot of tension in them. Because clearly, for my entirety of my adult life, I believe deeply that the cross was not the end. And that Jesus was buried dead, and on Sunday we'll gather and we'll celebrate the resurrection. The resurrection is what turns everything back. Those words now suddenly come alive, and they mean more than they ever meant. But I think we have to allow ourselves also to stay in that tension, to think about that moment when everyone's scattered and Jesus is dead in a criminal's death and Rome is won again. And go, why are we talking about Jesus today? I mean, if he said those things and they weren't true, then he's wild. And he's a blip in human history. And Pilate, who's Pilate and who's Caiaphas and who are all of these people? But instead, so that was my tension, didn't grow up with faith, right? But instead you come to this place where you start to encounter people who say, but I believe in Jesus. And you have to backtrack that 2,000 years and go, why? Well, because something happened. Because he didn't stay dead. Easter, resurrection. It's kind of a wild thought, to wrap our head around why Christianity is here today. I don't know if you ever do that, but I encourage you to do that. What unfolded? And we're not talking about his teachings of love. I'm talking about Jesus Christ, resurrected God, who has come into the hearts of men and women and transformed them over thousands of years, and they pass it on to others and on to others and on to others. That what happened? Well, those of you who are followers of Jesus know, and the rest of you, it's not a surprise, we believe he rose from the dead, right? But he's not there yet. First, Nicodemus is back. John tells us that Nicodemus, one of the ruling Sanhedrin, he brings a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 75 pounds with. There's another person with him, and taking Jesus' body, the two of them wrap it with the spices and strips of linen, making themselves ceremonially impure. They were in the group that agreed. The text said everybody agreed. They were in the group, and now they're back. And they're wrapping Jesus' body, and they're burying him at a cost to themselves. It says the next day, after preparation day, the chief priests and Pharisees went to Pilate. Sir, they said, we remember that while he was still alive, that deceiver said, after 3 days I will rise again. So Pilate gave the order to post guards around the tomb, and that's where we end. And we'll pick it up on Saturday and Sunday as we gather for Easter. I want to just give you a moment to think on this. The command of Jesus, which was followed by his betrayal, his arrest, and his death. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. Spend a moment in prayer and prepare your heart for the week ahead in light of Jesus' words.
You put no heavy